اللهم صل وسلم. اللهم صل وسلم. اللهم صل.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون أما بعد يقول الله عز وجل وعاشروهن بالمعروف وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كما رواه عنه الترمذي وغيره خيركم خيركم لأهله وأنا خيركم لأهلي. Brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders in the Quran to treat our wives with respect. وَعَاشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, to treat them with goodness. Ma'ruf is every kind of good and respect. And the Prophet ﷺ says, the best of you are the best towards their family. And I am the best of you towards my family. So the Prophet ﷺ, he is the example to be followed. Why is the best person out of the ummah the one who is the best to his family? The scholars said one of the reasons is because that's their true nature. The way you act in the house. The way you act in the masjid is the face we put on for people. For many of us, alhamdulillah, inshallah, it's our normal face. It's authentic. But for a lot of people, it's easy to put on a show. In the street, at work, in the masjid, you show your friends and your colleagues one side of who you are. But when it comes to our household, that's really who we are. We cannot keep a mask on the whole time we are in a house. We are our true personality when we're with our family. So that's why the best of us, the best of Muslims, are the ones who are the best towards their family. And the Prophet ﷺ, he's the same person inside the house and outside the house. He is the example and the qudwa and the uswa that we follow, alayhi salatu wassalam. The Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam had 11 wives throughout his life. From them, all of them lived after his death except for 2, meaning that 2 of his wives died during his lifetime. He saw 2 of his wives die. One of them was his first wife, Khadija radiallahu anha, Khadijatu bintu Khuwaylid. And the other was Zainab binti Khuzayma, not Zainab bint Jahsh, who is a more famous wife of the Prophet ﷺ, but he also had another wife named Zainab, who is Zainab bintu Khuzayma. All of the Prophet ﷺ's wives, except one, Aisha radiallahu anha, all of them were previously married, whether divorced, whether their husbands died, but all of them were previously married. This shows us that this was something normal in the society of the Sahaba, that they would get divorced, they would be married and marry a divorced woman, a woman would marry a divorced man, having more than one wife. These are things that were normal in their society, and unfortunately in our society, even though a lot of these things would bring about solutions, that a lot of people cannot find a spouse because, for example, they've been divorced once. At that point, nobody will accept them in marriage. This is something that unfortunately our culture and our customs have overtaken what is the true Islamic identity, which is that these are not things that should prevent people from getting remarried, and they should not be a stigma on a person that they have once been divorced, or they have previously been married, or they have children, or anything like that. Like we said, the Prophet ﷺ had many wives, but the point of this khutbah, inshallah, is just to draw some lessons that we can act on in our life from the way the Prophet ﷺ was with Khadija. Even if somebody today says, well, I'm not even married yet, so what am I going to learn from this? We can learn from how to hope to be a good spouse in the future. And we can also learn some lessons that are general lessons. The Prophet ﷺ was very loyal to Khadija radiallahu anha. This could mean that we are also loyal to our family, and we are also loyal to our friends, and we keep good connection with them. So this is something that can be applied even outside of the example of marriage. Rather, it's something which is general for all of the relationships that we have in our life. First of all, as we all know the seerah, alhamdulillah, and we know that Khadija radiallahu anha, she wanted to marry the Prophet ﷺ at what occasion? She wanted to marry him when she saw his good character, when she saw how trustworthy he was. Because she was a wealthy woman, and she would send caravans, and she would send businessmen to do business on her behalf. They would buy and trade for her. Yes, Khadija radiallahu anha was a businesswoman, of course, but many people, unfortunately, they use that in the wrong way. And they push that she was a businesswoman like women are businesswomen now. But she was a businesswoman, but she also was in her house. She was taking care of her household. And she would send men to do the long journeys for her and the long travels for her. And of course, that's the issue that cannot be discussed in this khutbah of women working and women going to business. So that's not my point of mentioning it, but the point is that she saw the Prophet ﷺ trustworthy. She saw him as being honest. She saw him as being an extremely good person. So she had the desire that she wanted to marry him ﷺ. Another thing which is very difficult or very different in our cultures, that this would be considered something that is not normal or abnormal. But as we said, many of these things are our culture and our custom. And unfortunately, a lot of times we make marriage very difficult on ourselves and difficult in our society to find who is available for marriage. But she wanted to marry the Prophet ﷺ when she saw the good that was in him ﷺ. She took care of the Prophet ﷺ, meaning she helped him when he did not have money, and she took care of the household, and she was a loyal and serving wife to him ﷺ. To the extent that we see in the hadith, she's mentioned in the very beginning of the story of Islam, which is one of the very first ahadith also mentioned in the beginning of Sahih al-Bukhari. That Aisha radiallahu anha says, أول ما بدأ به رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من الوحي الرؤيا الصالحة في النوم فكان لا يرى رؤيا إلا جاءت مثل فلق الصبح. That the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, the first wahi and the first revelation that came to him was in his dreams. This was like a leading into him becoming a prophet. And he never used to see a dream except that it would come true. All of his dreams were starting to come true at this point. وحبب إليه الخلاء فكان يتحنث في غار حراء وهو التعبد الليالي ذوات العدد. That the Prophet ﷺ started to like being alone, worshipping alone. So he would go to a cave in Ghar Hira, and he would worship for a number of days. The point of mentioning this hadith, وَيَتَزَوَّدُ لِذَلِكَ ثُمَّ يَنْزِعُ إِلَى خَدِيجَةَ فَيَتَزَوَّدُ لِمِثْلِهَا. He would prepare for these days and days that he would spend in the cave of Hira. And he would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he would just spend all of his time there worshiping. And this is before he's a prophet. He doesn't know that he's going to become a prophet. And Khadija radiallahu anha, he would come back when his supplies ran out. And Khadija radiallahu anha would supply him for another few days, for him to go and just worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in whatever way that he could at this point. حتى جاءه الحق وهو في غار حراء فقال له الملك اقرأ. So until the truth came to him, when he was in the cave of Hira, that the angel Jibreel came to him and said, Iqra, read or recite. So this is the story we all know. But we see that Khadija radiallahu anha, she was taking care of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, making sure that he was prepared. And some might say, like, this is a very strange situation for her. Her husband just wants to go and worship. But she knew that that's what's important to him. And she sees there is something very special about the Prophet ﷺ, so she was supporting him in what he was doing. As we know, the Prophet ﷺ, after this incident with the angel Jibreel, he came back to his house. And who was the first person he headed to? He headed towards Khadija radiallahu anha. That's where he found comfort in this very scary situation where an angel came to him in the cave and squeezed him, and he has no idea, alayhi salatu wasalam, what is happening to him. So he went, the first person he goes to is his wife. He finds comfort in Khadija radiallahu anha. And he says, Zammiluni, zammiluni, laqad khashitu ala nafsi. Cover me up, cover me up. And I am scared for myself. As again, the Prophet ﷺ doesn't know what's happening. So Khadija radiallahu anha, she covers the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and then she delivers words which are very comforting to him. She says, Kalla wallah, la yukhzika Allahu abada, innaka latasilu al-rahim, wa tahmilu al-kal, wa taksibu al-ma'doom, wa taqri al-dhayf, wa tu'inu ala nawa'ib al-haqq. She said, no, Allah will never disgrace you. Do not be afraid. Because, and she mentioned all of the good things that he does. He takes care of the poor. He takes care of a visitor. He helps in times of difficulty, and he hosts the guests. So the Prophet ﷺ, she's saying, you have all of these good characters, all of these good characteristics. Do not be worried. From this lesson, we can take that a spouse should try to support their spouse. A wife should try to support her husband when it comes to a difficult situation. Even to the point nowadays, they say, when it comes to just like marriage counseling advice, they say when a husband comes home and he's tired and he had some bad situation at work, for example, if he just wants to complain, the wife doesn't have to say, well, why did you do that? Why did you say that to your boss at work? Maybe, it's your fault because of what you said. Rather, just listen. Just be an ear for him and listen to what he's saying. Likewise, too, if your wife is just complaining, you don't have to criticize her. Rather, just be an ear. Sometimes people just want somebody to listen to them, and that will make them feel comfortable at that point. So Khadija radiallahu anha, she listened to the Prophet ﷺ, and then she supported him even by saying all of the good characteristics about him. And then she took him to Waraqa ibn Nawfal, and Waraqa told him that this is the same angel that came to the Prophet Musa, as we all know in the story. One of the interesting incidents that happened in the very, very early days of Islam is that a man came to visit Al-Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. This man's name is Amr ibn Afif, or Afif ibn Amr al-Kindi. And this man Afif, he said, I was a businessman and I came to visit Al-Abbas because I knew him, he was a friend of mine. And when I was visiting him, I looked nearby and there was a house. Out of the house came a man and he started praying. And then a woman came out and she joined him. Then a young boy under the age of puberty came and joined him. So he said to Al-Abbas, what's going on here? So Al-Abbas radiallahu anhu, at this time of course he's not a Muslim either, he said, that's my nephew, Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib. He says he's a prophet. And this woman with him is Khadija bint Khuwaylid. And that young boy with him is Ali ibn Abi Talib, his nephew. And they are praying. And he claims that he's a prophet and that one day he's going to conquer the kingdoms of Persia and Rome. So this was very early on in Islam. Perhaps the first day or second day or very early on in the days of Islam, when the Prophet ﷺ had just become a prophet and just started praying openly like this. So Afif ibn Amr, he became Muslim years later, and he said, I wish I would have become Muslim on that day, because I would have became 1/4 of Islam. There's only 3 Muslims on the earth at that time. He said, if I would have become Muslim at that time, I would have become 1/4 of Islam. We see here that the first people to believe in the Prophet ﷺ were those closest to him. His nephew Ali, his wife Khadija, because the Prophet ﷺ, people knew about him, his good character, his honesty, to the point that they could not reject him, these people that were so close to him. And the people who did reject him, it was only out of stubbornness, protecting their position. They did not want to lose the high positions that they had in Quraysh. Otherwise, anybody who was honest with themselves, they would follow the Prophet ﷺ right away because of what they saw of his good character. Khadija radiallahu anha has many strong occasions where she strongly supported the Prophet ﷺ. She was patient with him. From them is the incident of Shi'b Abi Talib, the valley of Abu Talib, where the Muslims were forced to be imprisoned, and there was a sanction placed on them that no one could buy or sell from them, to the point that the Muslims, if you walked by that valley, you would hear Muslim children, the babies, crying out of hunger, and nobody could help them. And people were eating leaves, people were eating whatever they could find, a piece of leather. Leather is not food, but it came from an animal once. So they would soak it and they would try to eat it, to this point that they were starving. People were starving to death. So Khadija radiallahu anha, she could have left in this difficult occasion, but she stayed with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and then she died shortly after. Aisha radiallahu anha, she narrates that the Prophet ﷺ would always praise Khadija radiallahu anha, even after her death. And she said, the Prophet ﷺ would always praise Khadija. إِذَا ذَكَرَ خَدِيجَةَ أَثْنَى عَلَيْهَا فَأَحْسَنَ الثَّنَاء. The Prophet ﷺ would always mention Khadija, and he would always talk good about her. فَغِرْتُ يَوْمًا فَقُلْتُ مَا أَكْثَرَ مَا تَذْكُرُهَا حَمْرَاءَ الشِّدْقِ. She said, I became jealous actually one day how much the Prophet ﷺ mentioned her. And she said, why do you talk about her so much? Why do you praise her so much? And she said a word which means she's just a very old woman. And in another hadith she said, عَجُوزٌ مِّنْ عَجَائِزِ قُرَيْشِ. She's just a very old woman from the old women of Quraysh. And she had become very jealous of her, and that's why she said these words. قَدْ أَبْدَلَكَ اللَّهُ خَيْرًا مِنْهَا. Then she said, Allah gave you somebody better than her, meaning herself, رضيallahu anha. So the Prophet ﷺ said, مَا أَبْدَلَنِ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ خَيْرًا مِنْهَا. He said, no, Allah did not give me better than her. He said, عليه الصلاة والسلام, قَدْ آمَنَتْ بِي إِذْ كَفَرَتْ بِي النَّاسِ وَصَدَّقَتْنِي إِذْ كَذَّبَنِي النَّاسِ. قَدْ آمَنَتْ بِي إِذْ كَفَرَ بِي النَّاسِ وصدقتني إذ كذبني الناس وواستني بمالها إذ حرمني الناس ورزقني الله عز وجل ولدها إذ حرمني أولاد النساء. He said why he praises Khadija radiallahu anha so much. She believed in me when nobody believed in me. She was the first and one of the very few to believe in him in the beginning of his message. She said I was truthful when everybody said I was a liar. She helped me with her money when everybody was preventing me from their wealth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me children from her when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not allow me to have children from other women. So these are all reasons for him to be extremely loyal to his wife Khadija radiallahu anha and to praise her alayhi salatu radiallahu anha. To the point that she has a big glad tiding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to her. And this is the hadith narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. That one day Jibreel came to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, the angel Jibreel. And he said to the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, يا رسول الله هذه خديجة أتتك معها إناء فيه إدام أو طعام أو شراب. He said, O Rasulullah, this is Khadija about to enter, and she has a plate or a container with some food in it. فإذا أتتك فاقرأها من ربها عز وجل السلام. If she comes to you, tell her Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala azza wa jal is saying assalamu alaikum to you. ومني أيضا, meaning Angel Jibreel also, I am sending my salam to her. وبشرها ببيت في الجنة من قصب لا صخب فيه ولا نصب. And give her the glad tiding of a house made of pearls in Jannah. There is no screaming in it, and there is no tiredness in it. The scholars, they mentioned that perhaps part of the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised her a house in Jannah where there is no raising of the voice in it is because that's how she kept the house with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Very calm and very mature way of dealing with one another. And unfortunately, when we think of a household nowadays, we think of screaming. The husband screaming at the wife screaming at the husband, everybody screaming at the kids. So it's just a very loud place. But we see that the Prophet ﷺ, he was very mature and he was very calm in the way that he would deal with his family members. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit us from what we have heard. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Brothers and sisters, we could go on and on about the marriage of the Prophet ﷺ to Khadija and the virtues of this noble woman, but I will end with two things. The first is that the Prophet ﷺ was loyal to her even after her death. In the ahadith, the Prophet ﷺ would slaughter animals, and he would send from the meat to the friends of Khadija radiyallahu anha, and he would say, Inna husna al-ahdi min al-iman. He would say, being loyal and taking care of people, the connection we have with people is part of iman. Inna abarra al-birri and أن يحسن الرجل إلى ود أبيه أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. In another hadith, the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام said that the best of bir, the best of good actions is that you are good to your father's friends. Your father's friends. So we see this is general. It's not just for your wife after she dies. But anybody that we have a connection with them, take care of that person's friends after they die. And Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, one day he saw an A'rabi man from the desert. So he got off of his camel and he told that man to ride on the camel. And he took the turban off of his head and he put it on that man's head. So the people were surprised and they said, why are you doing this? He said, this man used to be a friend to my father, Umar radiallahu anhu. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the best of bir, the best of good deeds, is that you are good to your father's friends after they die. So take care of these connections. Do not let them be lost. Try to reach out, send a gift to even the friends of our deceased family members. And the other hadith that I will end with, inshallah, is the virtue of Khadija radiallahu anha, narrated by Bukhari. That Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu said, I heard the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam say, خَيْرُ نِسَائِهَا مَرْيَمْ وَخَيْرُ نِسَائِهَا خَدِيجَةٌ. The Prophet ﷺ said, the best of the women on it, meaning on earth, is Maryam. And the best of women is Khadija radiyallahu anha. So this is the noble wife of the Prophet ﷺ, and there are so many lessons we can learn. But if we just take one lesson, it's this beautiful love and maturity and respect and loyalty that we find between the spouses, even if we find that our marital relationship is not like that, our marriage is not like that. We have all kinds of problems. At the very least, try to implement one or two things from the life of the Prophet ﷺ, and we will see an improvement by following the sunnah of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن ينفعنا بما قلنا وسمعنا. اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات. عباد الله، إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم واشكروه على نعمه يزدكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
استووا تراصوا واعتدلوا. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. سبح اسم ربك الأعلى الذي خلق فسوى والذي قدر فهدى والذي أخرج المرعى فجعله غثاء أحوى سنقرئك فلا تنسى إلا ما شاء الله إنه يعلم الجهر وما يخفى ونيسرك لليسرى فذكر إن نفعت الذكرى سيذكر من يخشى ويتجنبها الأشقى الذي يصلى النار الكبرى ثم لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. هل أتاك حديث الغاشية وجوه يومئذ خاشعة عاملة ناصبة تصلى نارا حامية تسقى من عين آنية ليس له طعام إلا من ضريع لا يسمن ولا يغني من جوع وجوه يومئذ ناعمة لسعيها راضية في جنة عالية لا تسمع فيها لاغية فيها عين جارية فيها سرر مرفوعة وأكواب موضوعة ونمارق مصفوفة وزرابي مبثوثة أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت وإلى السماء كيف رفعت وإلى الجبال كيف نصبت وإلى الأرض كيف سطحت فذكر إنما أنت مذكر لست عليهم بمسيطر إلا من تولى وكفر فيعذبه الله العذاب الأكبر إن إلينا إيابهم ثم إن علينا حسابهم الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So I would like everybody to just give 2 minutes. So there's a one brother in the family who is going to become the member of our new family. So inshallah I got brother Vincent to come over here and take the shahada. So takbir.
I bear witness.
I bear witness.
There is no one
There is no one
worthy of worship
worthy of worship
except Allah.
except Allah.
And I bear witness
I bear witness
that Muhammad
Muhammad
is the messenger
is the messenger
of Allah.
of Allah.
Alhamdulillah. Congratulations. Takbir. We'll give you some more.
Yeah, inshallah.
Congratulations.
السلام عليكم. الله.
You know who gave us the first $1 billion? Obama. But he did.
الله. يا الله. استر. أتوب إليك.